The engine slung into position, and of course we'll try to level it out and get a little more square before we go down with it, but the weight changed a little bit once with the flywheel, and flywheel housing came off the back, so might want to reset that. But anyway, it's time to now lower it down into place and just see how it's all going to look and fit. Okay, so of course the secret is to go slow. You can see here that I'm going to be lining up the input shaft for the transmission here, and I'm only about 2 or 3 inches off, and I'm coming down nice and slow, and I'm looking for areas where I'm starting to foul, and I've got a few. The wing is flexible and gets out of my way nicely, and you can see I'm up here inside the front cross member. Of course, my big concern has been whether or not I would foul on the alternator. Now, all the heating and cooling piping isn't done yet, so don't get me wrong, we don't know 100% how that's going to go. But as I'm studying this, I know I'm going to have to do a little more research, because I know that my shroud is just not going to work up in here, and this is sitting, you know, quite frankly, a little bit low at first glance. The only place that I'm really fouling right now is I'm going to pull off the 2 bolts right here for the air filter and get that to where I'm not going to be constricted or resting here. And of course, as I do that, it looks like I've got the 2 there and then something down in there. So I'll have to see what I can do. I might have to hoist this back out to get it all out of the way, but we'll just see what we end up with here. All right, well, we removed the air filter cradle, and I'm never a fan of taking head bolts out because there's such a sequence to putting them in, but we did, and we'll check our head gasket and tighten that up as soon as we can. We'll check our head gasket once we're running and make sure we don't have any leaks or anything that happen, but you can use head bolts for up to 5 times. This will be the 2nd time now that these are going to be torqued in. And of course, I want to be a little more careful, and I want to undo the fuel line to get this out. I was able to squeeze it out without really bending anything at all or putting a whole lot of flex on, but getting it back in just to put it there so I don't lose it, I'm feeling like I might gum up the threads a little, so we're not going to do that. Now, that was the main area that was hitting, and there's all kinds of things here that are going to be conflict that I'll have to study. The other area that looked like I was about to hit was on the motor mount. It looked like I was about to hit right up in here. So I think what I'm going to do is cut these back a couple inches, and then now as I swing it in this next time, I won't have to worry about thinking about those areas hitting, and I'll be able to study other areas. All right, well, very exciting to say that it has seated, and it just went in really, really nicely. Of course, the secret is nice and slow, but what we've got right now is the rough position of where the engine's supposed to be based on where the transmission is bolted in. So we've got the 2 bolts in the top, and then there are the nice thing about what's going on down there is that there's actually an alignment ring that is also seated perfectly. We know that we're also have the output shaft of the engine around the input shaft of the transmission, and so that is excellent. Now we're going to sit back and study a little bit on what's going on with the engine mounts, where they align. If I'm going to go with the 300 TDI's standard engine mounts, I can see right there where I would be putting the attachment, and I can definitely see that I've got to be careful. I've got to get some brake lines out of the way, and man, it sure would be nice to be able to just weld these in and not have to pull the engine yet again, because I'm thinking I'm going to pull the transmission to rebuild it, and then I could do the clutch and everything from that side. But either way, it's not that big of a deal, and I'm really glad that I did cut off those little ears that I mentioned I was going to cut, because they were definitely conflicting with the frame, but we're seated here. If I look at where the stock series motor mount is, next to these extra holes up on front here, that might be an option for me as well. What I don't have right now currently is the right bolts to go into those holes, but I bet I can figure that out. And so that looks really neat. If I look at the alignment of being straight down, I mean just perfectly in line with those two holes is that bolt coming up for that motor mount. If I look at how the alignment would be, where that would want to be, it is perfectly in line with the bolt hole, or those two bolt holes. So that's going to be an option for us for sure. We'll consider that. One side not have to weld might be really, really cool. Again, what we're going to do here is we're going to use the clutch from the Series I believe we're going to stick with the flywheel. I think we have to, actually, because of the bolt pattern. But we're going to be done with the clutch from the 300 TDI. We're going to use the Series clutch with the 300 TDI flywheel. That will allow us to then use the 300 TDI starter that we had originally. Okay, so the 300 TDI is in, and obviously it's a little bit low compared to the other engine, but that is how it sets and wants to set up with the transmission. It's also got it nice and square with the front crossmember, and we're looking now at items that we have to kind of start fiddling and sorting out. I just saw a nut that I'm going to dive for here, and put that aside. And I know where this one goes, so I'll put it back while I'm talking here. So, a couple things. Obviously, let's look first at tolerance and clearance. The tightest clearance you're going to have is, if you can see what I believe that my flashlight is on, the vacuum pump and the steering linkage for the Series 3. So the engine's bit and the Series 3 steering linkage fit just that cleanly. And I'm pointing to right back in here, and that is quite nice to see how cleanly that fits without having to do additional work. That's for obviously the accelerator, and so not having to adjust anything here for the linkages is a nice little benefit for now. We did remove the AC plate, I'm sorry, not the AC plate, I'm so sorry. The air filter plate had to come off, and we'll modify that with one bolt here and then the two cylinder head block, or cylinder head bolts have been pulled out there as well. Everything fits nicely across the back. We like that. With regards to the motor mount here, I have got to crawl underneath and see. It looks like it will definitely straddle the 3 bolts that hold on the bulkhead arm. And so the motor mount where I'm going to weld that on this side looks like it's going to be about right in this location. If I come to the other side and I try to avoid welding, and this is a temptation, is I talked earlier about if you see those 2 empty bolt holes in the block, and you notice the motor mount that's still on the frame. Well, the motor mount that would bolt to this engine from the J10 could fit beautifully there, but my exhaust downpipe is going to be tight. So I've got to study that a little bit, and noticing that it's that tight, I might say, nah, that's all right. I now have to cut out that motor mount so that I can let the exhaust downpipe come down. And I've got room to put in the original motor mounts here with some weld, maybe barely, but barely works. So I've got to now crawl under and get that going. Everything's held together with the minimum number of bolts. So I've got 2 bolts holding the bell housing to the transmission, to the flywheel housing from the back side, and then 2 bolts holding the block to the flywheel housing from the front side. I'm not worried about the load on that because this is carrying it, and I'm about to put the motor mounts on, and we'll be fine. Then I'll have everything dry fit enough to be able to pull the engine if I want, put the clutch back in, etc., and line it up. Or I might go ahead and button it up and just paint my welds, and then come at the engine from the inside, because I think I'm going to pull this transmission to do some work on it, and that would be so much easier just to leave the engine in place, and then only have to deal with the clutch and everything from the inside of the truck. So anyway, of course, if you're a Series guy, you know what the inside looks like, but we had to come at it from here, and as you recall, I did have to drill out 1 extra hole in the bell housing the way I did it in order to get the studs to line up. It meant that I did have to abandon a stud. You'll see right here there's an empty bell housing hole because the studs don't line up for this flywheel housing and this bell housing, but the circumference is exact, and I want to say it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 7 or 8 of the bolts do line up perfectly. It's just a matter of having to drill out, one new hole, and then let yourself have a couple abandoned ones. So anyway, I guess what I don't have figured out yet is the cooling, rudimentarily speaking. This is where I might go with the Steve Parker assembly for getting his hoses and his lines. He does a modification for this, and I'm not using his motor mounts and several other pieces, but his hoses and his electrical and his cooling system might well be worth it. This is supposed to have an electric fan, but there's also going to be a air conditioning condenser up on top. Is going to go in here, and so I'm already going to have a pusher fan. I might need to do a puller, or I might leave this without a shroud. I just don't know yet 100% what I'm going to do, but I'll make all those decisions tomorrow. What we do know is that there's no way the shroud can work because the fan is actually almost down to the level of the front cross member. And since it's not power steering conversion at this point, I don't have the option of making this all just fit with this tray, with this radiator housing. I can't get this to sit between the frame anyway. It has to sit up on top. So anyway, some more fab work to do, getting this to sit perfectly for us, play nice, and we'll go from there.